I glanced around the house, every corner echoing with memories of the years I had shouldered its weight, repairing, protecting, and nurturing it until it felt like more than just walls and a roof. It was a sanctuary I had kept alive through endless sacrifice, yet in a single merciless sentence, all that devotion was erased as if it had never mattered. The one who had given nothing now walked away with everything, while I was left discarded, invisible, as though I had never truly belonged here at all. I froze, my pulse thundering in my chest. The air grew thick, pressing down on me like a suffocating shroud. Their words cut deeper than any blade, but I knew fighting back was pointless. With quiet resolve, I rose, walked to my room, clutched my phone until my knuckles whitened, and began plotting something they could never imagine. They believed I would simply accept defeat and disappear. They were wrong. In 48 hours, when my sister stepped inside this house, she would wish she never had. The next morning, I awoke in our Burlington home, the sting of my mother's words still heavy in my chest. For years, I had labored to make this place truly ours, convinced it was a promise we all shared. Living under the same roof with my parents, I had taken on their struggles as my own, pouring my heart, my time, and nearly every dollar into its foundation. After their financial collapse 5 years earlier, I had stepped forward without hesitation. My career in software engineering allowed me to carry the burden. In just 3 years, I had paid more than $80,000 toward the mortgage when they couldn't contribute a cent. I never paused to question it. This was our home, the place where I had grown up, where every memory was sacred, where belonging seemed eternal. I still recall with piercing clarity the day the bank called, threatening foreclosure. My father sat slumped at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands, papers scattered like broken glass across the surface. My mother paced in tight, frantic circles, her voice sharp with dread. "We're going to lose everything," she whispered. I couldn't let that happen. I drained every last bit of savings, worked double shifts, and pushed myself to exhaustion until the loan was finally paid. The relief that lit their faces made it feel worth every sacrifice. At least, that's what I had believed back then. I painted the living room a warm beige, replaced warped floorboards, and repaired the creaky stairs. Every nail I hammered felt like a promise to hold our family together. My sister, however, was a phantom, living in California, calling maybe twice a year, always too busy with her marketing job. When I mentioned the mortgage, she laughed it off. "That's your thing, Monica," she said once, her voice dripping with dismissal. I sent photos of the new living room, the curtains, and a plush sofa I'd saved up for, but she never replied. I told myself it didn't matter. I was doing this for us, for family. At night, I would wander the rooms I'd renewed, running my hand along the fresh paint and imagining the house breathing with life. Still, there were cracks I chose to ignore. My parents leaned on me more each year. My mother would call asking for a little help with bills, and I would cover them. My father, unemployed after a layoff, needed me to pay for car repairs and small comforts. I didn't begrudge them then. I thought we were a team. I'd sit in the living room, the one I'd made warm with throw pillows and a rug, and picture growing old here, maybe raising children of my own in these light-filled rooms. The house had become more than wood and plaster. It was tangible proof that I could keep things together, that my efforts mattered. Looking back, I missed the signs. My mother's calls with my sister grew longer, softer in a way they never were with me. My father spoke of my sister's life in California with a pride I'd rarely heard about myself. I rationalized it as normal. They were my parents. Surely they wouldn't cast me out. But last night's dinner shattered that certainty. Their decision to hand the house to my sister wasn't merely unfair. It felt like an open betrayal. Every dollar I'd spent and every hour I'd worked felt stolen. I walked into the living room and stared at the sofa I'd bought with overtime pay. It wasn't just furniture, it was evidence of my sacrifices. The TV, the washer, the curtains, each item paid for by me, seemed to scream their ownership. If they wanted me gone, I'd make them reckon with what they were throwing away. My sister hadn't lifted a finger, yet she would soon walk into a home I had rebuilt. Not if I could help it. I pulled out my laptop, my hands steady at last. I wasn't about to beg or break down in front of them. I would make them see exactly what they were about to lose. By early afternoon, I needed answers. So, I dialed Kristen, my best friend since our college days at the University of Vermont. She's a lawyer now, sharp-minded, unflinching, and armed with the kind of no-nonsense attitude that always made her my anchor when life grew too tangled. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by the familiar walls of our Burlington family home, I spilled everything. The chaos of last night, the way my mother had slammed her fork down, her voice slicing through the silence with that cold 48-hour ultimatum, and the way my father just sat there, mute and complicit, letting her hand the house to my sister as though I were invisible. Kristen didn't cut me off. She just listened, steady and calm, her focus like a lifeline pulling me back from the storm. "Do you have any legal papers for the house?" she asked at last, her tone all business. "Anything from your parents? Or even before them?" I hesitated, then mentioned my grandfather, who had owned the place before he passed 2 years ago. I had always assumed it had transferred cleanly to my parents. Kristen went silent for a beat. Then, "Give me an hour," she said, crisp and certain. "I'll check something." That hour dragged like a lifetime. I paced the hallway, my thoughts a blur of panic and disbelief. My grandfather's face kept flashing in my mind, his weathered hands, his gravel-rough voice telling stories on the front porch, pointing to the beams and bricks he'd laid with his own sweat. He would glance at me, his eyes crinkling with a quiet pride, and say, "Monica, this place will always be yours." I used to laugh, chalking it up to his way of making me feel special. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. I dug through an old box shoved deep in my closet, pulling out photos of him beneath the oak tree in the yard, his arm wrapped around me as though I were his legacy. The sting of those memories burned deeper, knowing how casually my parents had swept them aside. When Kristen finally called back, her voice carried an edge of urgency. "Monica, you're not going to believe this." She explained how she'd reached out to a colleague in estate law and pulled my grandfather's will from the Chittenden County Clerk's office. My parents had never breathed a word about it, not once. Kristen read the document aloud, each sentence landing like a blow. My grandfather had left the house to me alone, not my parents, not my sister. The will had been signed, notarized, and filed 3 years before his death, naming me the sole heir to the Burlington property. I sank onto the bed, my whole body trembling. My breath came shallow, ragged. "How did I not know?" I whispered, the question breaking in the air like glass. Kristen's voice turned sharp, edged with steel. "Your parents had access to the will. They chose to keep it from you." The truth hit like a punch to the gut. My father and mother, the two people I had trusted unconditionally, had deliberately hidden my grandfather's final wish, twisting his legacy into a weapon to gift the house to my sister. In an instant, every moment fell into place. Their long, hushed calls with her, the pride that lit their voices when they spoke of her life in California, the silence whenever I mentioned my sacrifices. They had watched me pour more than $80,000 into this house, mend every fracture, and breathe life back into its walls. Yet all along, they intended to hand it over to someone who hadn't set foot here in years. My chest constricted, a knot of rage and heartbreak so tight it left me gasping. This wasn't just unfair. It was betrayal. deliberate and calculated, a knife driven between my ribs by the very people who had raised me. My jaw tightened as I walked into the kitchen, fury humming in my veins. On the counter sat my grandfather's old coffee mug, chipped and faded from decades of use. I lifted it with trembling hands, remembering his steady promise, his unshakable belief in me. They wanted to erase that, to rewrite his legacy for their own selfish reasons. Why? Because my sister had a family? Because her shiny career made her more worthy? Or because they assumed I would swallow their cruelty in silence? Maybe all of it. But none of it mattered. They had crossed a line, and I would not let them win. Kristen's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts, firm and grounding. This will is ironclad, Monica. You have a legal right to the house. We can challenge this. Her words were like a rope thrown into deep water, pulling me out of the fog of betrayal. For the first time in hours, I felt a spark of clarity. I didn't know every step yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't walking away. I pulled open a drawer, grabbed a notebook, and began writing furiously. Bank statements, receipts, proof of every repair and payment, every shred of evidence of my devotion to this home. My hands no longer shook. They were steady, purposeful. Kristen promised to meet me the next morning to map out our options. She laid out the first steps: filing a claim to enforce the will, gathering all financial records, moving quickly before my parents tried to twist the law in their favor. For the first time since last night, I felt it. The faint but unmistakable edge of control returning to me. My parents thought they had blindsided me, that I'd quietly pack my bags and vanish without a fight. They had no idea what I was capable of. I sat at the table, pen poised in my hand, the weight of resolve pressing into the paper. I wasn't just planning, I was preparing for war over what was mine. The next morning, I rose early, my notebook still spread open from hours of feverish notes. The house was silent. My parents had gone to Montpellier to visit friends, leaving me alone with the walls I had worked so hard to keep standing. I walked into the living room and let my eyes rest on the sofa I'd bought with my very first big paycheck, a plush gray piece that had taken months of saving, a quiet symbol of independence and pride. If they thought I'd leave it behind for my sister to drape herself across, they were mistaken. I uncapped my pen and began a new list. Every item I had paid for, every corner that carried my touch. The flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, the stainless steel washing machine humming in the basement, the curtains I had chosen to match the beige paint I'd rolled on myself. Each entry on the page was proof of my years here, evidence of the life I had built and sustained, while they pretended not to notice. With the list complete, I called Kristen to lock in our legal strategy. Her voice came sharp and steady through the phone. "We'll file a claim to enforce your grandfather's will," she said. "It's straightforward, but we need airtight proof of your contributions." I reached for the thick folder I had already prepared, stuffed with receipts, invoices, and bank statements. Every purchase, every repair, every dollar accounted for. Kristen advised me to get a notarized affidavit documenting my financial role, and we set a time to meet later that day. For the first time in days, I felt a surge of power coursing through me, the sense that I was no longer cornered but finally moving forward. But before anything else, I needed to secure what was mine. I searched online for moving companies in Burlington until I found Green Mountain Movers, a local outfit with solid reviews. My hands didn't hesitate as I dialed. A man named Tom answered, his voice low and practical. I explained quickly, firmly, that I needed a rush job. "Can you do it today?" I asked, my voice calm but unyielding. He hesitated, then finally agreed to send a truck by noon. I gave him the essentials: the TV, the sofa, the washer, my bedroom dresser, even small things like the microwave. "This is personal property," I told him, making sure each word landed. "I'm taking what's mine." Tom didn't ask for explanations. He confirmed the address, quoted me a price, and promised his team would be there. When I hung up, my pulse was steady, my mind clear. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt certain of one thing: this was the right move. While waiting, I moved room to room, double-checking my list with the precision of an auditor. The kitchen table, a weathered hand-me-down from my grandfather, wasn't mine to take, but the chairs were. I'd bought them just last year after my mother complained about the rickety old set. One by one, I tagged them with bright, sticky notes, marking what stayed and what went. The process felt strangely methodical, almost soothing, as though each note I placed was a declaration: this is mine, this is my work, this is my money, this is my home. I forced myself not to think about my parents or my sister. The task itself was my focus, a ritual of reclamation. Around 10, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Linda, our neighbor from across the street, a kind woman in her 60s who never missed bringing us cookies at Christmas. She'd seen me pacing through the window and had come to check in. "You okay, Monica?" she asked gently, her eyes brimming with concern. I didn't mention the will or the betrayal. It was too raw, too dangerous to share just yet. Instead, I offered a thin smile. "I'm moving some things out. It's complicated." She squeezed my arm with the kind of tenderness only neighbors who had watched you grow up could give. "You've always been good to this house. Whatever's going on, you don't deserve it." Her words slipped past my defenses and hit deep, and I blinked hard against the tears threatening to surface. I nodded, grateful, though I couldn't quite speak. Not long after, Mr. Williams stopped by, his boots dusty from his morning shift. He had known my grandfather well, always swapping fishing stories with him in the driveway. His gaze lingered on the walls as though he could still see my grandfather's shadow there. This place meant a lot to him, he said quietly. Then, glancing at me, "And to you too?" I nodded again, this time with conviction. Their kindness was a lifeline, reminding me that even if my own family had turned their backs, I wasn't alone. I thanked them both, promising to explain later, and they left with solemn nods, giving me space to continue. At noon sharp, the movers arrived, a 3-man crew in a white van, efficient and unsentimental. I walked them through the house, pointing out each tagged item. They moved quickly, wrapping the washer in blankets, strapping down the TV, lifting the sofa I had cherished. Watching them carry my belongings into the truck was surreal, like dismantling my life piece by piece. Yet beneath the ache was a flicker of vindication. My sister wouldn't be handed the comfort of things I had built. Kristen called as the last load was secured. "Keep the receipts for the moving costs," she reminded me. "This strengthens your case." Her words tightened my resolve. Every document, every receipt, was another weapon in the battle ahead. By mid-afternoon, the house felt stripped bare, its hollow walls echoing with loss. Yet in that emptiness, I felt stronger, lighter, as though I had carved out the truth and carried it with me. My parents and sister thought they could erase me from this home. They were about to learn otherwise. Then came the knock, sharp, deliberate. I opened the door, and there she was, Tara. My sister stood on the porch with her suitcase at her feet, her eyes narrowed with the arrogance of someone who already believed she owned the place. She had flown in from California, expecting to step into a fully furnished home, her victory assured. Instead, she was staring at me, and I braced myself, knowing this encounter wouldn't be civil. Tara shoved past me, her heels striking the hardwood with sharp staccato clicks. "Where's everything?" she snapped, her eyes darting around the hollow living room, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stayed by the door, arms folded. "I took what's mine," I said evenly, refusing to let her rattle me. She spun, her face flushed crimson. "Yours? Mom and Dad said this house is mine now. You don't get to strip it bare." I stepped forward, my tone cold, measured. I paid for that sofa, the TV, the washer. Everything I removed. You never contributed a dime. Her eyes widened, but defiance sparked in them. You think you're entitled because you threw some money around? She shot back. This is my home now, Monica. You're out. The air between us tightened, heavy, electric. I clenched my fists, forcing myself not to shout. You haven't been here in years, I said, my voice steady. I kept this place alive while you were off in California, too busy to care. Tara laughed, brittle and sharp. Oh, please. You stayed here out of pity, playing the martyr. Mom and Dad chose me for a reason. Her words pierced, but I refused to flinch. They chose wrong, I answered, stepping closer, my voice like ice. You don't even know half of what I've done for this family. She stormed through the house, yanking open doors, her fury escalating with each barren room. The kitchen, the basement, each corner betrayed her expectations. Her face reddened, her voice cracked. The chairs! The curtains! She screamed, spinning toward me. You took everything. I didn't blink. Only what I paid for. You want a furnished house? Buy it yourself. Tara's hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone. Her voice shook with rage. You're unbelievable. I'm calling Mom and Dad. They'll deal with you. I leaned casually against the wall, letting my calmness unnerve her. Go ahead. They're not here. She froze mid-dial, suspicion flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? I offered nothing, only silence, watching as her fingers stumbled across the screen. She paced the kitchen, shouting into the phone. She gutted the place, Mom. It's empty. I stood still, letting her rant, letting her words echo off the stripped walls. When she finally hung up, she turned on me, her glare venomous enough to scorch. They're coming back from Montpellier tonight, she hissed. You're done, Monica. I didn't respond, only lifted a hand and pointed to the door. You know where the exit is. Tara's jaw tightened. She snatched up her suitcase, muttering venom under her breath, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there in the silence that followed, my pulse hammering against my ribs, but my resolve steady as steel. Tara thought she could waltz in and claim everything. She had no idea what storm was waiting for her. I locked the door behind her, my mind already on the next move. That evening, I sat at Kristen's apartment in downtown Burlington, my belongings safely tucked away in a rented storage unit a few blocks over. My phone buzzed relentlessly, my mother's name flashing again and again across the screen. I let it ring into voicemail, knowing exactly what awaited me. Tara had dragged them back from Montpellier, and now they were choking on the fallout of their own deception. I wasn't ready to hear their voices. Not yet. Instead, I cradled a mug of coffee at Kristen's kitchen counter, the exhaustion of the past 2 days weighing heavy in my bones. When I finally braced myself and pressed play, my mother's voice burst through the speaker, shrill and raw, almost unrecognizable. Monica, what have you done? There's a stranger in our house. My father's voice cut in, thick with disbelief. Some man claims he owns it now. Explain yourself. I didn't call back. The truth was simple. They had walked straight into the reality they themselves had created. Kristen had moved quickly, leveraging my grandfather's will to file a claim that pulled back the curtain on their lies. The house wasn't theirs to gift or withhold anymore. It had been sold quietly, legally, to a local investor who leapt at the chance to own a Burlington property. I hadn't brokered the deal myself, but by enforcing my rights, I had set the dominoes falling. My phone rang again, this time my father. I answered, my voice steady before he could launch into his outrage. Dad, I'm not coming back, I said flatly. You hid my grandfather's will. You tried to hand my home to Tara. He sputtered, his words a mix of fury and disbelief. We were protecting the family. You can't just... I cut him off, sharp and final. You protected Tara, not me. The will was clear. This is on you. And with that, I hung up. My hands trembled, but my conviction did not waver. Mom called next, her tone laced with venom and desperation. Monica, you're tearing us apart. Come fix this. I took a deep breath, my voice cold, deliberate. I'm done fixing your mistakes. Talk to Kristen about the will. With that, I ended the call and silenced my phone. Kristen sat across from me, her laptop glowing, papers spread across the table like evidence in a trial. Her expression was razor sharp. They're panicking, she said. The new owner has the deed. They can't undo this. I nodded slowly, staring into the dark swirl of my coffee mug. The house I had fought for, poured my sweat and savings into, was gone. Not because I had wanted it sold, but because my parents' greed and deception had left me no other choice. A pang of loss ached in my chest, but beneath it was a strange and steady relief. They had underestimated me, believing I would collapse under pressure. They were wrong. The calls kept coming. Voicemails stacked one after another, each one more desperate than the last. Monica, we're your family, my mother pleaded in one, her voice breaking. You can't do this to us. I refused to answer. Every message was another stone they tried to place on my shoulders, and I refused to carry their weight anymore. My grandfather's will was my shield, his legacy my proof. I wasn't the one who had betrayed family. They were. As the night deepened, I sat with Kristen, outlining plans, building a new path brick by brick. I knew with certainty I would never go back to that house, or to the lies that had poisoned it. Months later, I stood in my new Burlington apartment, sunlight spilling golden through wide windows. The air was different here, lighter, freer. I had built a life entirely my own, free from the crushing weight of my family's expectations. I'd landed a position at a local marketing firm, small but vibrant, where my ideas weren't dismissed, but celebrated. My days filled with meetings, coffee runs to the cafe down the block, and quiet evenings arranging my space exactly as I wanted it. The sofa, the TV, the pieces I had fought to keep. They stood as symbols of survival, of defiance, of freedom. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Tara since that night at Kristen's. Their numbers were blocked, their voices silenced. For the first time in my life, the silence felt like peace. The silence was heavy at first, pressing in on me like an unfamiliar weight, but soon it became a gift. A space to breathe, to rediscover who I was without their shadow looming over me. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Tara had scrambled to buy a house in California. She'd expected to inherit our family home effortlessly, but once it was sold, she was forced to dip into her savings. The news didn't bring me joy, but it felt right. She had assumed she could take what wasn't hers, and now she was paying the price of her arrogance. I pictured her in her polished California world, signing mortgage papers with a forced smile, maybe replaying her harsh words to me. But I didn't linger on the thought. My gaze was forward, not chained to her struggles. My parents faced their own reckoning. Without the house, they ended up in a small rental on the far edge of Burlington, a sharp fall from the control they once wielded. Word spread quickly through our tight-knit community, and neighbors like Mrs. Linda and Mr. William, people who had quietly supported me, didn't hesitate to show their disappointment. My parents' reputation, once solid, began to crumble as the truth came out. They had hidden my grandfather's will to rewrite his legacy. Financially, they faltered too, with no property to leverage and legal fees stacking up from their failed attempts to contest the sale. I didn't chase the details, and I didn't need to. Their downfall was theirs to carry. I was finished bearing their burdens. Through it all, Kristen became my anchor. She checked in often, her lawyer instincts sharp, her friendship even sharper. She saw the legal battle through to its conclusion, making sure the sale stood firm and my rights stayed protected. Over coffee one morning, she leaned back, grinned, and said, "You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." I smiled, because for once, I believed it too. For years, I had undervalued myself, pouring everything into a house I thought defined me. But this ordeal revealed something deeper. My worth was never tied to their approval or to those walls. It was in my ability to rise, to fight back, to choose myself. Setting boundaries was the hardest lesson of all. Cutting contact wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about survival, about protecting my peace. I had given too much for too long, trying to earn love from a family that refused to see me. Now, I knew better. I walked Burlington streets with a lighter step, passing the lakefront where the water glittered under the afternoon sun. The life I was building wasn't flawless, but it was mine, earned, chosen, and lived entirely on my terms. And for the first time in years, that was enough.